Hudson Line platform at 125th Street looked like a disaster movie set, which turns out it pretty much was. Emergency lights strobing red across hundreds of faces, cops with bullhorns shouting contradictory directions, and me standing there with my 8-year-old holding a stuffed elephant while trying to process what the hell "all bridges sealed" actually meant. I'm Ryan Malik, by the way. Used to be NYPD Transit until my back gave out 3 years ago. Too many nights chasing fare jumpers through those tunnels will do that. Now I'm a paramedic with Northwell, which sounds like a step up until you realize I'm still dealing with the same crazy people. Just now I have to keep them alive instead of arresting them. Tonight was supposed to be simple. Pick up Aiden from my ex-wife's place in Morningside Heights, catch the 11:47 to Croton, get him back to my apartment before school tomorrow. Simple, right? Dad, why is everyone yelling? Aiden squeezed my hand tighter. The kid's got his mom's eyes but my stubborn chin, and right now both were focused on a National Guard soldier directing people toward the last northbound train with movements that looked more like crowd control than helpful guidance. Just some kind of emergency, buddy. Probably a gas leak or something, which was bullshit and we both knew it. Gas leaks don't get you soldiers carrying M4S, and they definitely don't get you emergency broadcasts every 30 seconds about bridge closures and quarantine zones. But Aiden's 8, and sometimes lying to your kid is the most honest thing you can do. The train pulled in one of the older Bombardier sets that MTA should have retired years ago but kept running because, well, MTA. Through the scratched windows I could see it was packed tighter than a rush hour express, which made no sense for an 11:47 p.m. departure. People were pressed against the doors, some crying, most just staring at their phones with that 1,000-yard stare you get when the news stops making sense. Final departure for Croton Harmon and POUGHKEPSIE. The conductor announced over a speaker system that sounded like it was drowning. All passengers must board immediately. Repeat. Final departure. Final departure. Not last train of the night. Final departure. My radio crackled to life, the little Motorola I keep clipped to my belt even off duty because old habits die hard. All units, be advised. Level 5 biological containment now in effect for Manhattan south of 110th Street. Hudson Tunnel sealed after this departure. Repeat. Tunnel sealed after this departure. Biological containment. Dad. Aiden was tugging on my jacket. Dad, you're hurting my hand. I loosened my grip, realizing I'd been squeezing his fingers like they were the last solid thing in a world suddenly made of quicksand. Sorry, kiddo. Come on, let's get on the train. We pushed through the crowd, and I used my old cop voice to clear a path. Excuse me, got a child here, coming through. It still worked, mostly. People stepped aside, and I caught fragments of conversations, something about a virus, something about Queens, something about the CDC setting up shop in the armory. None of it good. The train doors were staying open longer than usual, and I could see why. The conductor kept looking down the platform like he was waiting for something, checking his watch, then looking again. His face had that particular shade of worry that comes from getting orders you don't understand from people who won't explain them. We found seats in car 3-inch middle of the train, which my old patrol instinct said was safest. Better sight lines, multiple exit options, farthest from whatever might come from either direction. Aiden pressed against the window, his elephant tucked under one arm, and started his usual train routine. Counting tunnels, identifying station names, asking if we could see the river yet. Normal kid stuff, which felt like the most precious thing in the world right about then. Ladies and gentlemen, came the announcement as the doors finally hissed shut. This is your conductor speaking. Due to emergency track conditions, this train will make limited stops only. Yonkers, Dobbs Ferry, and Croton Harmon. Passengers for other destinations should prepare for alternative arrangements. Alternative arrangements? Like what? Swimming across the Hudson? The train lurched forward with that familiar electric whine, and I felt my stomach drop as we entered the tunnel. Not because I was afraid of tunnels, hell, I'd spent half my career in them, but because for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure what we'd find when we came out the other side. Dad, look. Aiden pointed across the aisle where a woman was holding her phone up, trying to get signal. She's got 6 bars, but her call won't go through. He was right. Looking around the car, I could see the same thing everywhere, full signal strength, dead calls, which meant someone was jamming communications, and that someone had the kind of equipment that could block cell towers from 30 feet underground. Government equipment. Ryan. The voice came from 2 seats behind us. I turned to see Maria Santos, a nurse from Northwell I'd worked with on a few calls. She looked like she'd been crying. Ryan, thank God. Do you know what's happening? They're saying there's some kind of outbreak downtown, but the news isn't making sense. I don't know any more than you do, which was true, but my gut was telling me we were about to find out more than any of us wanted to know. You trying to get home? My mom's in Yonkers. I was supposed to work a double, but they sent everyone home around 10. Said there was some kind of citywide health emergency. Then the buses stopped running, and the subway. She shook her head. The subways completely shut down. This was the only way out. Only way out. Not best way out. Only way out. I was about to ask her what she'd heard at the hospital when the lights flickered. Just once, but enough to make everyone in the car look up from their phones. Then they came back, steady as before, but somehow the quality felt different. Harsher, like we'd switched from regular power to emergency power without anyone mentioning it. Ladies and gentlemen, the conductor's voice again, but this time with an edge that hadn't been there before. We're experiencing some minor electrical issues. Nothing to be concerned about. We should be arriving in Yonkers in approximately 15 minutes. 15 minutes to Yonkers. In normal times, maybe, but I'd ridden this train enough to know we should have been there already, and we were definitely not moving at normal speed. If anything, we seemed to be slowing down. Aiden had fallen asleep against my shoulder, his elephant clutch tight, and I found myself counting his breaths, one of those dad habits you develop when your kid has asthma and you've spent too many nights in emergency rooms listening to doctors explain what respiratory distress actually means in practice. That's when I noticed the smell. It was faint at first, like bleach mixed with something organic, something that reminded me of the morgue at Bellevue where I'd done my paramedic clinical rotations. But it was getting stronger, and it seemed to be coming from the front of the train. I looked around the car. Most people hadn't noticed yet, too focused on their dead phones or staring out the windows at tunnel walls that all looked the same. But Maria had noticed. She caught my eye and mouthed, "Do you smell that?" I nodded, then carefully shifted Aiden so I could stand up without waking him. "Watch him for a second?" She nodded, and I made my way toward the front of our car, past passengers who were starting to shift uncomfortably in their seats, past a businessman who kept coughing into his hand, past an old woman clutching a rosary with fingers that looked too pale in the harsh lighting. At the door between cars, I stopped. Through the glass, I could see into car 2, and what I saw made my blood turn to ice water. A man in a Metro-North uniform was lying in the aisle between the seats, not sitting, not unconscious, lying there with his arms twisted at angles that human arms shouldn't twist, and his face, Jesus Christ, his face looked like someone had taken a cheese grater to it. But he was moving, twitching, and the sounds coming from his throat. That's when the lights went out completely. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, bathing everything in that sickly red glow that makes everyone look like extras in a zombie movie, which I was starting to realize might not be as metaphorical as I'd like. "Dad!" Aiden's voice, sharp with panic. I turned back toward our seats just as the first scream came from car 1. The scream cut through the train like a knife through silence, followed by sounds that my brain kept trying to categorize as anything other than what they obviously were. People dying badly and fast. I sprinted back to Aiden, who was wide awake now and looking around with those big eyes that seemed to absorb every terrible detail. Maria had moved into my seat and was holding him close, which was good because my hands were shaking and I didn't want him to see that. "Maria, I need you to listen to me very carefully." I kept my voice low, calm, the way you talk to people in shock. "Something's wrong in the front cars. We need to move toward the back of the train. Now." "What kind of wrong?" But she was already standing up, still holding Aiden, and I could see in her face that she'd worked enough emergency shifts to know when someone was using their "we're all going to die" voice. The kind where we don't ask questions, we just move. I grabbed our stuff and started herding them toward the rear door of our car. "Aiden, buddy, we're gonna play a game, okay? We're gonna see how quiet we can be while we walk to the back of the train." "Is it like hide and seek?" "Exactly like hide and seek." The lie came so easily I almost convinced myself. We made it halfway through car 3 when the lights went out again. This time they stayed out longer, and when the emergency lighting flickered back on, I could see that the other passengers were finally starting to panic. People were standing up, looking toward the front of the train, asking questions nobody could answer. "Ladies and gentlemen," the conductor's voice over the intercom, but now he sounded like he was speaking through clenched teeth. "We're experiencing some technical difficulties. Please remain calm and stay in your seats while we..." The announcement cut off mid-sentence, replaced by static, then silence. That's when I heard the pounding. Something was beating against the door between car 2 and car 3. Not knocking, not trying to open it, beating on it like it was trying to break through over and over with the kind of mindless persistence that doesn't come from rational thought. "Ryan." Maria's voice was barely a whisper. "Ryan, what is that?" I didn't answer because I was too busy doing math in my head. Hudson Line train, 6 cars, roughly 50 passengers per car during normal times. But this wasn't normal times. This was evacuation, which meant maybe 70, 80 people per car. And if whatever was happening in car 1 was spreading to car 2. "Move, now." I pushed them toward the rear door just as the pounding stopped. Silence can be scarier than noise, and this silence was deafening. Every passenger in our car had gone quiet, all of us listening for something we didn't want to hear. The train kept moving through the tunnel, but it felt like we were trapped in a metal coffin being lowered into hell. The door between car 2 and car 3 exploded inward. I don't mean it opened. I mean it exploded, like someone had hit it with a sledgehammer, and through the twisted metal came something that had once been human but definitely wasn't anymore. It moved wrong, like its joints were broken, and its face, Jesus' face was gone. Just raw meat and exposed bone, but somehow it could still see us, still know where we were, and the sound it made when it saw us was like nothing I'd ever heard, like screaming and gargling at the same time. "Go, go, go." I shoved Maria and Aiden toward the back of the car as the thing that used to be human launched itself at the nearest passenger. A college kid who'd been asleep until about 5 seconds ago. The kid's scream lasted exactly as long as it took for teeth to find his throat. We ran through car 3 as it turned into a slaughterhouse behind us. I tried to keep Aiden facing forward, tried to keep him from seeing what was happening, but there was nowhere to hide from the sounds. Screaming, tearing, that wet slapping noise that meat makes when it hits hard surfaces. The door to car 4 was locked. Shit! I yanked on the handle, threw my shoulder against it. Nothing. "Maria, help me with this." She was trying, but she only had one free hand because she was still carrying Aiden, and the kid was crying now. Big silent tears that broke my heart even as I was calculating how long we had before whatever was behind us finished with the other passengers and came for us. Not long enough. I could hear it moving through car 3, that scraping, shuffling sound of broken bones dragging across metal floors. And underneath that, worse than that, I could hear it feeding slurping, crunching, satisfied little grunts like it was enjoying a 5-star meal. "The window," Maria said suddenly. "Can we break the window?" I looked at the emergency window next to us. Standard Metro-North safety glass, designed to be broken in emergencies, with a little hammer in a red case marked "Break Glass." But we were underground, moving at maybe 40 miles per hour through a tunnel that was barely wider than the train itself. Even if we could break it, even if we could fit through it, we'd die on impact. We're going to die anyway. She was right, but dying in a tunnel was just dying faster, and I wasn't ready to give up on keeping my son alive. Not yet. The door handle turned. I don't know how. I don't know why. Maybe someone in car 4 had finally unlocked it. Maybe the lock was just jammed and my earlier efforts had loosened it. Maybe God decided to give us one tiny miracle in the middle of our personalized apocalypse. But the handle turned, and the door opened, and we stumbled through into car 4 just as the thing from car 2 finished with its meal and started looking around for dessert. I slammed the door behind us and looked for something to barricade it with. Car 4 was packed with passengers, mostly families like us, trying to get out of the city, trying to get somewhere safe. They looked at us with wide eyes, taking in our panicked faces, our blood-stained clothes, when had we gotten blood on our clothes? And I could see the questions forming. "Don't open that door," I said to the car in general. "Whatever you do, don't open that door." "Why?" asked a woman holding a baby. "What's back there?" I was trying to figure out how to explain without causing a mass panic when the thing hit the door from the other side. The whole car shook with the impact, and everyone could hear it, that inhuman shrieking, like a wounded animal mixed with a rusty gate. No one asked any more questions. "Is there another way out?" I asked the conductor, a different guy from the one who'd been making announcements. This one looked young, scared, and like he was about 30 seconds away from a complete breakdown. The back of the train. Car 6. That's the only. But we can't stop. We can't stop until we reach the platform. Why can't we stop? He looked at me like I was asking why the sun couldn't rise in the west. Because they're watching. They're tracking us. If we stop in the tunnel. He shook his head. Orders are to keep moving no matter what. Orders from who? I don't know. I don't know anything. They just told us to get everyone out, get them to the quarantine zone, and don't stop for anything. His voice was climbing toward hysteria, and I could see that he was no more in control of this situation than we were. The pounding on the door was getting more insistent, and I could swear I heard more than one voice making those awful sounds, which meant whatever was happening was spreading, person to person, faster than we could run from it. "How long to Yonkers?" I asked. 12 minutes. Maybe 10 if we don't slow down." 10 minutes. I looked around the car, counted heads. 43 people, including us. Families, old people, a few teenagers who looked like they'd been caught downtown when everything went to hell. Normal people who'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time and now found themselves trapped in a metal tube with something that was turning their fellow passengers into monsters. Aiden tugged on my sleeve. "Dad, I'm scared." "I know, buddy. I'm scared too." The honesty felt like the only gift I could give him. "But we're going to be okay. We're going to get off this train, and we're going to go home. And tomorrow you're going to tell all your friends at school about the crazy train ride you took with your dad." He smiled at that, just a little, and I realized I was going to do whatever it took to make that lie come true. The door behind us buckled inward. Not much, just enough to let us know that whatever was on the other side was getting stronger, or there were more of them, or both. The metal was actually bending, which shouldn't have been possible with human strength. But then again, these things probably weren't human anymore. "Everyone to the back of the car," I called out, using my old cop voice again. "Stay calm, move slowly, help the people next to you." They moved. Not fast, not efficiently, but they moved, and I found myself thinking that people were generally pretty good in a crisis if you gave them clear instructions and didn't let them think too hard about how screwed they were. Maria was standing next to me, still holding Aiden, and I could see her taking inventory the way nurses do when the ER gets busy. Who needed help walking, who was injured, who was going to panic first. Professional instincts kicking in even when the situation was completely beyond anything her professional training had prepared her for. 2 more cars, she said quietly. 2 more cars, I agreed. We started moving toward car 5, shepherding our little group of survivors through the swaying train car, while behind us something that had once been human continued its patient work of breaking down the door that was all that stood between us and becoming its next meal. Outside the windows, tunnel lights flickered past like distant stars, and I found myself wondering if we'd ever see real stars again. Car 5 was where things got complicated. Not because of monsters, though I was pretty sure those were coming. No, Car 5 was complicated because it was full of people who still believed this was just a regular emergency, the kind that happens in cities sometimes and gets resolved by competent authorities who know what they're doing. "Excuse me," said a guy in a Yankees jersey as we pushed through the door. Our little group of 43 people suddenly becoming 58 people in a space designed for 40. "Excuse me, you can't all just push in here. There are seating assignments. There are rules." I almost laughed. Rules. Like whatever was systematically eating its way through the front half of the train gave a damn about Metro-North's seating policy. "Sir," I said, trying to keep my voice calm and reasonable while behind us something crashed against the door we just locked. "I'm a paramedic and former NYPD, and I need you to listen to me very carefully. There's been an incident in the forward cars. We need to evacuate everyone to the rear of the train. Now." What kind of incident? That was the million-dollar question, wasn't it? How do you explain to someone that their fellow passengers have turned into something out of a horror movie without sounding completely insane? The answer came courtesy of the thing in car 4, which chose that moment to break through the door. The sound was like a car crash in a blender. Metal tearing, glass shattering, and underneath it all that inhuman shrieking that made every primitive part of your brain scream run. Everyone in car 5 turned to look, and what they saw through the twisted doorway was something that had once been the young mother with the baby from car 4. She still held the baby. I won't describe what the baby looked like. Some things you don't put into words, even in your own head. But the woman, she was wrong in every way something could be wrong. Her clothes were shredded. Her skin was gray and mottled. And when she moved it was with the jerky, uncontrolled motion of a marionette with half its strings cut. But it was her eyes that really got to me. They were still human, aware. Like somewhere inside that twisted body, the real person was still there, watching, screaming silently as her body did things she couldn't control. "Oh my God," someone whispered. "Oh my God, what happened to her?" "She's sick," I said, because it was the only explanation that wouldn't send everyone into complete panic. "There's some kind of outbreak. We need to get to the back of the train and isolate ourselves until we reach the station." The thing that had been a mother looked at us through those horribly human eyes, tilted its head like a curious animal, and then opened its mouth wider than any human mouth should open. What came out wasn't quite a scream and wasn't quite a roar, but it was definitely a call. And from somewhere behind it, other voices answered. "Move," I said. Everyone moved to car 6. Now. This time, nobody argued. We pushed through the crowd, 43 refugees from hell trying to get 60-plus people to understand that their world had just ended and they needed to accept it fast or die slow. Some got it immediately. Others kept asking questions, kept trying to apply logic to a situation that had moved far beyond logic. "Is it terrorism?" asked an older man in a business suit. "Are they using some kind of chemical weapon?" "I don't know," I told him, which was true, "but we need to get as far from it as possible." "Shouldn't we help her? She looks sick. Shouldn't we?" "No," Maria's voice, sharp as a scalpel. "No, we can't help her. Whatever she has, it's contagious, and it's fatal. and our only job right now is to keep it from spreading to us." The businessman stared at her. "You're a doctor?" "Nurse. And I'm telling you, do not try to help anyone who looks like that. Do not touch them, do not get close to them, and do not let them touch you." Behind us, the thing that had been a mother was climbing through the twisted doorway, moving with that horrible broken marionette gait. But it wasn't alone anymore. I could see at least 2 other shapes behind it, and the sounds, Jesus, the sounds coming from car 4 now were like a slaughterhouse on speed. Car 6 was the last car on the train, and it was packed. Not just packed with people, but packed with luggage, supplies, things people had grabbed when they evacuated. It looked like the aftermath of a disaster, which I guess it was. "How many?" I asked Maria, who was doing her nurse thing, counting heads and assessing the situation. 93 people in a space for 40, plus all their stuff. She shook her head. "If we have to defend this car, we'll make it work." But even as I said it, I was doing the math. 93 people, 1 exit through car 5, which was now compromised. No weapons except whatever we could improvise, and an enemy that felt no pain and seemed to get stronger as it fed. "Dad." Aiden was tugging on my sleeve again. "Dad, why is that lady moving like that?" I looked back through the windows in the doors. The thing that had been a mother was halfway through car 5 now, and I could see what Aiden meant. She wasn't walking. She was flowing, like her bones had turned to liquid, contorting her body to squeeze between seats and around obstacles in ways that human spines just don't bend. "She's very sick, buddy. Is she going to get better?" I wanted to lie. God, I wanted to lie so badly it hurt. But looking at that thing, seeing the way it moved, remembering the sounds from the forward cars, "I don't think so." The young conductor from car 4 pushed through the crowd toward me, his face white as paper. "The radio," he said. "I've been trying to raise central dispatch, trying to tell them what's happening, but all I'm getting is..." He held up his radio, turned up the volume. Static. Then, faintly, a voice. "Military command to train designation Hudson 7. Do you copy? Hudson 7. What is your status? Hudson 7. Respond immediately, or we will assume contamination protocols are in effect." Contamination protocols. "Answer them," I said. "What do I tell them?" "The truth." He keyed the radio. "Central dispatch, this is Hudson 7. We have a situation on board. Passengers in the forward cars are there." He looked at me helplessly. I took the radio. "Central dispatch, this is Ryan Malik, paramedic ID 47291. We have a biological incident on board. Unknown pathogen causing extreme behavioral changes and violence. Request immediate medical isolation protocols upon arrival at Yonkers Station." Silence. Then, "Hudson 7, what is your current passenger count?" I looked around car 6. Approximately 90 passengers in the rear car. Unknown number in forward cars, but assume all forward passengers are compromised. "Copy, Hudson 7. Maintain current speed. Do not attempt to stop before Yonkers platform. Repeat, do not stop before Yonkers platform." "Why?" I asked. "What happens if we stop?" Another pause, longer this time. Then a different voice, older, with the kind of authority that comes from making terrible decisions for the greater good. "Hudson 7, this is Colonel Martinez, CDC Rapid Response. Your train is carrying a biological agent. If you stop before reaching the containment zone, we will be forced to implement Protocol 7. "What's Protocol 7? You don't want to know. But I did know. I'd been a cop long enough to understand euphemisms, and I'd been a paramedic long enough to know that sometimes the only way to stop a disease is to make sure it doesn't spread. Protocol 7 meant they'd blow the tunnel with us in it. "How long to Yonkers?" I asked the conductor. 6 minutes, maybe 7 if we slow down. 6 minutes. I looked back through the door windows, counted the shapes moving through car 5. At least 4 of them now, maybe more, all moving with that horrible fluid grace toward car 6. Toward us. Can we lock the door to car 5? I don't know. Maybe. There's an emergency lock, but I've never. Show me. He led me to the door, pointed to a red lever marked emergency use only. The instructions were clear. Pull lever to engage magnetic lock. Warning. Lock cannot be disengaged from inside car. I looked back at our 93 people. Families, kids, old people, a few teenagers with cell phones they kept checking even though there was no signal. Normal people who just wanted to get out of the city and were now trapped in the last car of an express train to hell. If I lock this door, I said to Maria, we're committed. No going back, no changing our minds. Whatever's in those forward cars stays there and we stay here. And if you don't lock it? I looked through the window again. The things that had been passengers were almost through car 5 now. One of them saw me watching and pressed its face against the glass. What was left of its face, anyway. It smiled. Then we all die. I pulled the lever. The magnetic lock engaged with a solid thunk that felt like the sound of a coffin closing. Behind the locked door, the things that had been human pounded and shrieked and threw themselves against metal that I hoped was stronger than they were. 5 minutes to Yonkers, the conductor said. 5 minutes. I looked around car 6 at all the faces staring at me, waiting for me to tell them what came next, how we were going to survive this, what we were supposed to do when the train stopped and the doors opened and we had to step back into a world that had gone completely insane. I didn't have any answers. But I had something almost as good. I had a son who believed his dad could fix anything, and I was going to make damn sure I didn't disappoint him. Everyone listen up, I said, using my cop voice one more time. In 5 minutes, this train is going to stop, and those doors are going to open. When they do, we're going to get off this train together, we're going to follow the evacuation procedures, and we're going to get somewhere safe. Everyone understand? They nodded. Most of them, anyway. What I didn't tell them was that I had no idea what we'd find when those doors opened. No idea if the platform would be safe or if whatever had infected the passengers in the forward cars had already spread to wherever we were going. But sometimes lying to people is the kindest thing you can do. The train began to slow. Yonkers Station looked like a war zone lit by Christmas lights. As we pulled into the platform, I could see military vehicles parked behind barriers that definitely hadn't been there this morning. Soldiers in full hazmat gear, floodlights that turned everything harsh white and black, and medical personnel setting up what looked like field triage stations. But it was organized chaos, professional chaos, the kind that happens when people who actually know what they're doing get enough warning to prepare for the worst-case scenario. Ladies and gentlemen, came a new voice over the train's PA system. Not our conductor, but someone from outside, someone in authority. This is Colonel Martinez, CDC Rapid Response. We are implementing emergency biological containment procedures. When the doors open, you will exit the train in an orderly fashion and proceed to the processing stations. Do not run. Do not leave the designated areas. Follow all instructions immediately. Through the windows, I could see soldiers taking positions around the platform, their weapons pointed not outward but inward, toward where we'd be standing once we got off the train. Took me a second to understand. They weren't there to protect us. They were there to contain us. Dad? Aiden whispered, pressing against my side. Why do they have guns? Just being careful, buddy. But my gut was telling me that if any of us showed signs of infection, if any of us moved wrong or acted wrong or looked wrong, those soldiers had orders to shoot first and ask questions never. The train lurched to a stop, and I felt that familiar lurch in my stomach that comes with the end of any journey. But this wasn't relief. This was the moment when we found out whether we'd escaped hell or just changed addresses within it. Everyone stay together, I called out to car 6. Families with children first, then elderly, then everyone else. Move slowly, keep your hands visible, and do exactly what they tell you to do. The doors opened with their usual hydraulic hiss, but instead of the normal sounds of a train station, announcements, conversation, the rumble of traffic, there was just silence. Waiting silence. The kind that comes when everyone's holding their breath. We started filing off the train. 93 people who'd survived something that had no name yet, stepping onto a platform that felt like the border between the world we'd known and whatever came next. The soldiers were professionals. They directed us toward the processing stations with calm efficiency, checking us for signs of infection, taking names, asking questions about what we'd seen. But I could see the tension in their posture, the way their fingers stayed close to their triggers, the way they kept us grouped together where they could watch all of us at once. "Sir," one of them said as I approached with Aiden and Maria, "I need you to answer a few questions. Were you in direct contact with any infected individuals? Did you sustain any injuries during the incident? Are you experiencing any unusual symptoms?" "No, no, and no," I said. "We were in the rear car the whole time. We saw what happened through the windows, but we didn't have direct contact." He made notes on a tablet, then looked at Aiden. "What about the child?" "Same. He's fine." But even as I said it, I was watching the other passengers from our car going through the same process. Most were being directed to a fenced area with medical tents and food stations. A few were being taken aside for additional questioning. And one was being loaded into an ambulance with a full hazmat escort. "Sir," the soldier said, "we're going to need to hold you for observation. Standard protocol for potential exposure situations. Shouldn't be more than 72 hours. 72 hours. 3 days of not knowing if whatever had gotten to the people in the forward cars was already working its way through our systems, just taking longer to show symptoms." "What about the others?" I asked, nodding toward the train. "The people in cars 1 through 5? His expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. "That's being handled." I looked back at the train. Through the windows of car 5, I could see shapes moving, pounding against the glass, making sounds that didn't carry through the thick windows but that I could imagine all too well. The soldiers saw me looking and one of them stepped closer. "Sir, I need you to move away from the train. What's going to happen to them, to the people still in there?" He glanced back at the train, then at his commanding officer who was standing near a mobile command unit, talking into a satellite phone. "That's above my pay grade, sir, but you need to move to the processing area now." I took Aiden's hand and started walking toward the medical tents, but I couldn't stop myself from looking back one more time. As I watched, a technical crew in full hazmat gear was connecting some kind of equipment to the front of the train. Cables, monitors, things that looked way too sophisticated for a simple biological cleanup. "Ryan," Maria caught up to us, her face grim. "I heard one of the medical staff talking. They're not planning to process the people in the forward cars." "What do you mean?" "I mean they're sealing the train, permanently, with everything inside." I stopped walking. "They can't do that. There might be people still alive in there, people who are just sick, people who could be treated." "Ryan." Her voice was quiet, patient, the way she probably talked to families in the ICU when the news was bad. "I've seen 3 different outbreaks in the ER over the past 5 years. Flu, norovirus, that weird respiratory thing that went around last winter. I know what sick people look like." She nodded toward the train. "Those aren't sick people anymore." I wanted to argue with her. I wanted to believe that modern medicine could fix anything, that there was always hope, always a chance. But I'd seen the thing that had been a mother with a baby, seen the way it moved, the intelligence behind its eyes even as its body did inhuman things. And I'd seen what was left of the college kid after it had finished feeding.
"Daddy, I'm Festi."
Aiden tugged on my hand, And I realized that in all the chaos and horror of the past hour, I'd forgotten the most basic things. My kid needed water, needed food, needed to use the bathroom, needed all the ordinary human maintenance that keeps going even when the world ends. "Let's get you some water, buddy." The medical tent was organized chaos, exactly what you'd expect from military field medicine. Efficient, sterile, focused on triage and basic care. They gave Aiden a juice box and a packet of crackers, checked him for signs of shock or trauma, and asked me about a dozen questions about his medical history and current symptoms. "He seems fine," the medic said. A young woman with sergeant's stripes, and the kind of calm competence that comes from dealing with disasters on a regular basis. Kids are resilient, sometimes more resilient than adults. "What about the quarantine? How long do we have to stay?" "Depends on the incubation period. Could be 24 hours, could be a week. We're still learning about this pathogen." She lowered her voice. "Between you and me, you got lucky. The earlier trains from Manhattan, they didn't make it to their destinations." "What do you mean, didn't make it?" She glanced around, making sure no one was listening. "I mean, the tunnels are sealed at both ends now. Every bridge, every tunnel, everything. Manhattan is completely cut off." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. How many people are trapped? Best estimate? About 2 million. 2 million people. In a city where whatever had infected our train was spreading, turning people into things that weren't quite human anymore. I thought about Sarah, Aiden's mom, who lived in Morningside Heights. I thought about my old partner from the transit police who lived in Queens. I thought about all the EMTs and paramedics and nurses I'd worked with over the years, still in the city, still doing their jobs, having no idea what was coming for them. "Can I make a phone call?" I asked. She shook her head. "Communication blackout. Orders from way up the chain. Nothing in or out until we know the extent of the contamination." Nothing in or out. Manhattan had become a tomb, and we were some of the last people to escape it alive. "Sir." Another soldier approached, this one with captain's bars. "I'm Captain Rodriguez. I need to debrief you about what happened on the train. It'll help us understand what we're dealing with." For the next hour, I told him everything. The smell, the sounds, the way the infected moved, the timeline of how fast it had spread through the cars. He took notes, asked detailed questions, and recorded everything on a digital device that looked way more sophisticated than standard military equipment. "You said the infected retained some level of awareness?" he asked. "The woman with the baby. She looked like she knew what was happening to her but couldn't stop it." He made more notes. "And the spread pattern was car to car, moving from front to back?" "As far as I could tell, yeah. Started in car 1, then car 2, then 3. We locked ourselves in car 6 before it could reach us." "The emergency lock held?" "So far." He looked up from his tablet. "Mr. Malik, I want you to understand something. What you survived tonight, what you witnessed. There are maybe 50 people in the entire country who have seen what you've seen and lived to tell about it. Your testimony is going to be critical for our response planning." "Response planning for what?" "For when this gets out. And it will get out. It always does." The certainty in his voice was worse than any of the screaming from the train, because he wasn't talking like this was a containable outbreak that would be over in a few days. He was talking like this was just the beginning. 3 days later, we were still in the quarantine facility. It wasn't bad as military detention goes. Clean barracks, decent food, medical staff who actually seemed to care whether we lived or died. But we couldn't leave, couldn't make phone calls, and couldn't get any real information about what was happening in the outside world. What we could get were rumors. Manhattan was under complete martial law. The bridges and tunnels were sealed with actual explosives, not just barriers. The death toll was classified, but the whispered numbers kept getting bigger every day. And there were reports of similar outbreaks in other cities: Boston, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C. It's spreading, Maria said on the morning of day 3. We were sitting in the rec area, watching Aiden play checkers with one of the other kids from the train. Whatever this thing is, it didn't start in New York. Bioweapon. Maybe, or maybe just evolution. Viruses mutate, adapt, find new ways to spread. She was quiet for a moment. In nursing school, they taught us about the Spanish flu, about how it killed more people than World War I. But that was 1918. We were supposed to be past all that now. Supposed to be. Yeah. That afternoon, Captain Rodriguez came to see me again. This time he had someone with him, a woman in a CDC hazmat suit who introduced herself as Dr. Ford. Mr. Malik, we need to ask you about your background, she said. Your file shows you were NYPD Transit Police for 6 years, then EMT training, now working as a paramedic. Is that correct? Yeah. Why? We're putting together response teams. People with your combination of skills, law enforcement, medical training, knowledge of urban infrastructure, are exactly what we need. I looked over at Aiden, who was now building something with Legos that another kid had shared. I'm not interested. The pay is excellent. Government housing, full medical benefits, education benefits for your son. I said I'm not interested. Dr. Ford exchanged a look with the captain. Mr. Malik, I don't think you understand the situation. The federal government is implementing emergency powers. Skilled personnel are being mobilized for the national response effort. This isn't really a request. You're drafting me? We're offering you a choice. Volunteer for the response team with full benefits and the guarantee that your son will be placed in a secure facility with the best possible care. Or, she didn't finish the sentence. I looked at her for a long moment, then at Aiden, then back at her. What kind of response team? Urban recovery operations. Going into infected zones to gather intelligence, rescue survivors, eliminate hostile entities. Eliminate hostile entities. Military speak for killing the things that had been human. How long? Initial deployment is 6 months. After that, we'll reassess based on the situation. 6 months of hunting monsters in cities that had been turned into graveyards. 6 months of doing the kind of work that would either make me into something harder than I already was or break me completely. But Aiden would be safe, fed, educated, protected from whatever the world was becoming. I'll need to see the facility where he'd stay. Of course. 2 hours later, they drove us to a compound about 20 miles north of the quarantine center. It looked like a cross between a boarding school and a military base. High fences, guard towers, but also playgrounds and gardens and kids playing soccer on a field that could have been anywhere in suburban America. It's not permanent, Dr. Ford assured me as we walked through the facility. Just until the crisis passes. The children get excellent education, psychological support, all the care they need. And if I don't make it back? Then he stays here until he's 18, with full support for college and career placement. I knelt down next to Aiden, who was sitting on a bench watching the other kids play. Hey buddy, remember how we talked about me having to go back to work? You mean being a paramedic? Something like that. These people have a really nice place where you could stay while I'm working. Like summer camp, but better. What do you think? He looked around at the other kids, at the playground equipment, at the staff members who were clearly trying their best to make this feel normal and safe and temporary. Will you visit? Whenever I can. Will you call? Every night. Promise. I looked into his eyes, those same eyes he'd inherited from his mother, who was probably dead in Manhattan along with 2 million other people, and made the only promise I could make. I promise I'll try. He nodded solemnly, the way 8-year-olds do when they're being asked to be braver than any kid should have to be. Okay, Dad, I'll stay here. That night, my last night before reporting for response team training, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the train, about the sounds from the forward cars, about the thing that had been a mother with a baby. I kept wondering if this was how the world ended. Not with nuclear war or climate change or any of the big dramatic disasters we'd all been expecting, but with something small and biological and invisible that turned us against ourselves. But then I thought about Aiden, about how he'd handled everything that had happened with more courage than most adults would have managed. I thought about Maria, who'd stayed calm and professional even when everything went to hell. I thought about the other passengers in car 6, who'd followed instructions and helped each other and made it through the night alive. Maybe that was the thing about the end of the world. It didn't end all at once for everyone. It ended piece by piece, person by person, city by city. And in between the endings, people kept being people. They took care of their kids and helped strangers and did their jobs and tried to make the best choices they could with whatever impossible options they were given. The response team deployment started at 0600 the next morning. 12 of us, all with similar backgrounds: cops, paramedics, firefighters, military veterans. People who'd spent their careers running toward danger instead of away from it. "Gentlemen and ladies," said Colonel Martinez at our first briefing, "you are now part of Task Force Recovery. Your mission is to enter infected urban areas, locate and extract survivors, gather intelligence on the pathogen's behavior and spread patterns, and eliminate hostile entities as necessary for mission success." He clicked to the next slide, which showed a map of the eastern seaboard with red zones marked over most of the major cities. As of this morning, we have confirmed outbreaks in 17 metropolitan areas. The pathogen appears to be spreading faster than our ability to contain it. Initial infection to full behavioral change is now estimated at 6 to 8 hours. Infected individuals retain some cognitive function but display extreme aggression toward uninfected persons. 6 to 8 hours. On the train, it had seemed like minutes. "Sir," asked one of the other team members, "what's the mission timeline? How long do we keep doing urban recovery?" Colonel Martinez was quiet for a moment. "Until there's nothing left to recover." That was 6 months ago. Now I'm sitting in a bunker outside what used to be Philadelphia, writing this report on a tablet that will probably never be read by anyone who doesn't already know how this story ends. My team has been in and out of a dozen dead cities, pulling out survivors who usually don't survive the psychological evaluation, gathering data that gets fed into models that keep revising the timeline for total societal collapse. Aiden is still safe at the facility. I call him every night like I promised, and he tells me about his classes and his friends and the new books he's reading. He sounds happy, or at least as happy as any kid can be when their world has ended and they're trying to pretend it hasn't. Sometimes he asks when I'm coming home, and I tell him soon. Sometimes he asks what I'm doing for work, and I tell him I'm helping people. Both of those are lies, but they're the kind of lies that love is made of. The truth is that there probably isn't going to be a home to come back to, and what I do for work is hunt down things that used to be human and make sure they can't hurt anyone anymore. The truth is that we're not winning this war, we're just trying to lose it slowly enough that maybe some of us can figure out how to survive whatever comes after. But I still call him every night, and I still tell him I love him, and I still make plans for when this is all over because that's what parents do. We lie to our kids about how the world works, and we lie to ourselves about how much control we have, and we keep going because the alternative is giving up, and giving up isn't an option when you're someone's whole world. The train to Yonkers was supposed to be the last train out of Manhattan. Turns out it was just the first train into whatever comes next. But we made it. Aiden and I made it, and tomorrow I'll call him again, and maybe tomorrow the world will make a little more sense, or maybe it won't, but either way we'll still be here. Still breathing, still trying, still human. That has to count for something. End of report. Emergency alert system, this message will repeat. Attention. All civilians in designated safe zones are reminded that quarantine protocols remain in effect indefinitely. Do not attempt to leave secured areas. Do not approach the perimeter fences. Do not attempt to contact anyone outside the safe zone network. Infected zone expansion has accelerated beyond initial projections. Current estimates indicate 47% of continental United States under biological containment. Remember, we are still here. We are still fighting. We will survive this. This message will repeat.